All right, welcome back, everybody. I think everyone's going to kind of trickle in a little bit. This is unlike our previous breakouts. You guys might remember from last June, where you just sort of cruelly close on you. But I hope all of your conversations were really wonderful. The ones I popped in on and saw some friendly faces were lovely to hear. So you will see I am joined by our two coalition co-chairs, obviously Maureen, who joined us before, and now we are so happy to have Atul Gawande, our other coalition co-chair, joining us real life and in person. We didn't know if he was going to be here due to the vagaries of some of the Senate confirmation hearing process, but we're excited to sort of take a few minutes and reflect on what you guys have been talking about in your breakouts before we move into our next session. So reminder, anybody who took notes in your breakouts, please type those into your chat. I've seen a couple of groups reporting like any reflections or questions that you'd like us to discuss. We have about 10 minutes from now. And if we don't get to those questions now, we will at a later date as we put out more of the data coming out of this and hold like for the future sessions. So I'm seeing that one of the first comments that people had, Atul and Maureen, was really about this idea of weathering, really sort of striking a chord with people, sort of saying like, you know, none of these stats were really surprising me, but this sort of sense of weathering really, I think was really resonated. How do you think about this weathering effect, this kind of intersection between complex chronic conditions as they move into serious illness, and why it's important to think about that intersection when we're talking about equity in serious illness care? Atul, can I start with you?
Yeah, I think if you ask people if they are seriously ill, a lot of people who, I mean, first of all, Michael Curry was so powerful, and he was just in bringing it home to going all the way back through history. And then you understand why when you ask, are you seriously ill? People who are objectively seriously ill don't think of themselves that way. I think of my mother, who's at 84 has metastatic ovarian cancer, but plays tennis every day. I mean, table tennis, not ping pong, not on the courts. And she would say she's not seriously ill. I would say she has a serious illness, and that's the weathering, right? What people have gone through over the course of their lives is what they're measuring their experience against. So how do you address that? Some of that is in the definitions we use and understanding that there's a lot of our definitions that incorporate race to begin with, right? Whether your kidney disease or your heart disease reflects, you can have discounts for race that actually pit ethnicities and race against one another in ways that are harmful. But then even further, like the definition that we used of serious illness, it is, do you have these conditions and is your life changing? Is your functionality or is your condition changing in any way? Those are critical elements of making sure that we don't miss the people where weathering is happening, where they just feel, well, this is as good as I can expect. And we can sometimes offer and expect a lot more.
Yeah.
I completely agree, Atul. And I think that when I was listening to Michael talking about that, I was also kept coming back to his idea that we needed to move from a moment to a movement and really create some structures. But I think, as you say, it really comes down to understanding how that person views their own life and their own disease. And I think, therefore, asking first, tell me about your life, tell me about your day, is much more meaningful, and then coming back to the clinical stuff. I think in a lot of ways we've trained patients to be clinically focused. I think we'll ask them a question and they automatically go into their latest blood sugars, or they'll pull out their lab results, as opposed to really telling us about the social determinants and the life they're living. And I think getting at that is really going to help us to change the way that we provide healthcare. I've been thinking a lot about what I'm calling the 4 T's. The first one is tempo. How often do we interact with somebody? If someone says they've got diabetes and we'll say, well, I'll see you in 6 months, the tempo, I think, is not going to affect their daily lives. The second is touches. Do we have to have an in-person meeting or a virtual meeting, or can we text them? There's so many different ways now that we can communicate. The third is teamwork. Do they have to relate the same story over and over and over again? Or can we bring together effective teams? And I was telling my breakout, trying to work with Alex Cora about getting some hints from him on how do you bring together a team of the Red Sox from very different skills and backgrounds and actually help them to win. And then the last is trust. And I've heard that word so often, frequently. So I think maybe if we could redesign the health system around those 4 T's, we might have better understanding of who we're dealing with.
I think the system comment, I'm looking at a bunch of the other comments, and a thread that's going through a lot of them is this interplay between individual clinicians who right now are really burnt out. And I sort of, there's one message you could take away from this being kind of like, just telling me to listen better isn't something, you know what I mean? A, I know that. And B, I don't have the time, resources, incentives, structures. So this interplay between the individual clinicians and frontline workers who are the face of the system for people, but recognizing at the same time that they are part of systems and are facing their own limits in changing what they would like to be able to do. It's so I think we sort of know that, and patients know that in some part of their brains, but I think it is a real tension, especially difficult right now. How do we navigate, for the purpose of our mission, that so many people in our audience right now are, clinical people, that tension between the personal and the fact that we're all part of a system too.
You want to take that first, Maureen?
Well, I'll just say that as I mentioned in my remarks, I think asking what matters to you, to our staff, is critically important right now. Really understanding compassion, and I would tell you a very quick story about an environmental services worker who was called to HR and being told he was going to be fired. And when he went back to the locker room, his team said, "What matters to you?" Because that's what they hear all the time. And he said, "I've been absent too much." They said, "Why?" He said, "Because I have to go to court. I'm going through a difficult divorce and I'm going to lose my child if I don't go fight for him. He's my 5-year-old child and I love him." And all of the staff came together and they said, "We will create a flexible staffing system so that not only you can deal with what you're going through in your life, so can we all." And I think it's that kind of leadership and understanding that's so critical right now.
I think what I'd build off of that to say is there's a couple kinds of things that we ask people to do. One is the kinds of things that actually make your life easier, but you don't expect it to. And I think Maureen's suggestion of, taking a moment to ask what matters to you most. What are your priorities? What are your biggest worries or fears? Those moments of human connection feel like it take an extra moment, potentially are open-ended and doesn't get me through my 15-minute visit, but in fact allies you with your patient, with your colleague, with your family member, allows you to understand what their goals are, and then makes it you much more effective. And taking that moment actually pays off in the long run. And I think when you feel more effective, you feel less burned out. And there are some things we ask you to do that are likely to work that way. And then there are other things where, it's not helpful if you have to repeat that conversation over and over, and you have to figure out how to do the documentation system, and how do I pass the word along, and how do I make sure the care is aligned, everybody is aligned with the goals of this patient. I need a whiteboard in the room and I want to write it up. Okay, now it's gotten hard. And now you need systems, and you need leaders and managers who are going to take that as their larger goal. And many of you on this call are leaders at one level or another who can make that happen, and think about with your teams how you make that happen. It's critical to addressing and hearing people addressing the equity issues, being able to produce a better result for people. And it happens to make your own patients, your own family members, your own residents much more appreciative and grateful for the cares that's happened. But that depends on the leaders coming together to join with what the folks on the front lines are experiencing.
Oh, there are so many amazing things happening in chat right now, but unfortunately that's all the time that we have for in this section. We have everything written down here, and I think our hope is to sort of take it all in and continue the conversation. The breakouts are always too short and too long at the same time, and we'll continue. But now we are so fortunate for our last segment to hand over the virtual mic to Atul. As you probably all know,